And welcome to a special live edition of Arizona Crime Uncovered. I'm Ashley Holton. Today, we are focusing on a case that ABC 15 has followed extensively for about a year and a half, the Preston Lord case. And 1 week ago, we saw the first person sentenced in this case. William Owen Hines pleaded guilty. He's the first person to plead guilty. He pled to a lesser charge of manslaughter in Preston's case, but he also changed his plea in 3 other cases, a vehicular aggravated assault and 2 other aggravated assault cases. And all of this played into that sentencing that happened 1 week ago. He got 17 years total behind bars for Preston's case and also that vehicular aggravated assault. We're going to break down the sentencing and also what is next in the case, because we have 6 other suspects that are still charged with murder in the case. We also have a really big development, Preston's law passing out of the state legislature, now on the governor's desk. We have been watching that as well. But we're doing this because we got so many questions after sentencing and even this week. So I want to bring in our guests. We have Armando Nava. He is a Valley attorney. He is going to be going through these questions and can actually take your questions in real time. So you can comment, and we're going to try and bring as many of those questions in. I've heard from the community, and we're going to ask some that I have heard as well. And we also have Nicole Grigg, investigator for ABC 15. She has been covering the Preston Lord case from the very beginning, October 2023, and she is going to help guide this conversation as well. We first want to take you back inside the courtroom for that sentencing of William Owen Hines 1 week ago. Take a listen.
We pray for justice to be served today, Lord. But more than that, we pray for healing.
All 4 matters are State of Arizona versus William Owen Hines. This is the time set for sentencing.
Ben was driving home from playing cards with his friends when his car was struck by the vehicle of William Owen Hines. For months, I've agonized about writing this victim statement. How do I say what I want to say and still honor the other families in this courtroom whose child is not here? How do I share the trauma that I've experienced as a result of this collision, knowing that my son's recovery is a miracle?
I believe I speak for every parent when I say that what happened to Preston is every parent's worst nightmare. His tragic passing shook our community to its core, but it also sparked a movement.
Since the day that William Owen Hines participated in taking Preston's life, my world has been shattered beyond repair. I will have to endure the emptiness, not only in my heart, but also in my husband's heart.
Preston William Lord was my world, my buddy, my friend, my proudest accomplishment. For 9 months, I carried him. A lifetime, I loved him. And far too soon, I was forced to say goodbye to him.
Drunk or not, William Hines made a choice. He chose to join in with his group of friends, chase down and beat Preston.
We are also at a sentencing because Owen stepped up and took responsibility for his actions and the part that he played in all of this and why we're here today. He pleaded guilty, and he's the first one to do so.
Although I did not know Preston personally, he seemed to be an astounding man, a kind soul senselessly taken from this world. He didn't deserve not one of those kicks or punches. I have realized it would be wrong to ask for forgiveness when this family has already had so much taken from them. They owe me nothing. However, I owe them everything.
So coming out of a courtroom, a week later now, a lot of questions, Armando, when it comes to how does this work? A plea agreement. William Owen Hines had multiple cases. Is that part of the decision, or what's going on behind the scenes to go ahead and move forward with that plea agreement?
Sure. And I think what's hard in these cases is a lot of work does go on behind the scenes. You're going to get a lot of communication between the defense team and the prosecution. For something as serious as what happened here, usually the prosecution is going to ask the defense team to come to them and make an offer, right? To say, hey, this is what we think would be appropriate. And then, like anything else, negotiation is going to ensue. A plea agreement is really just a contract between the state and the defendant, where they agree that this is going to be the resolution. Anytime there are multiple cases, they try to do what's called a global resolution, where they resolve every single case as part of that plea offer. And that's what ended up happening here.
When you look at all of this, because I know that there was a ton of confusion. So William Owen Hines pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of manslaughter for Preston's case. We had that vehicular aggravated assault you heard from the victim's mom in that case, in that video there. We also had 2 other aggravated assault cases. When you look at the plea agreement, it said the maximum between the manslaughter charge and also that vehicular aggravated assault was 21 years. So how, when you're looking at all of that, I want to make people, just make sure that everyone is understanding when that is all taking place, when you're looking at all of these cases, what is that like behind closed doors, and what is the discussion like?
So first, the discussion is going to be between the prosecution and defense when they take a look at, okay, here's the sentencing range after trial. This is what this young man would be looking at. But then here are all of the factors that could lead the state to not prevailing at trial. Here's all the reasons why the defense believes they're going to prevail. So they take that into account, and they also take any mitigating factors into account before determining what is an appropriate resolution. Now, people are going to disagree as to whether a plea offer is appropriate. And that is why, there are different sides. That's why this is adversarial. In this case, the offer was 10.5 to 21 years, 10.5 being the presumptive on the manslaughter charge. Presumptive meaning that is where the court presumes the sentence should be. That is where they start. And then the court determines any aggravating factors and any mitigating factors. And they balance those out to determine what an appropriate sentence is. So just because a maximum is available doesn't mean that the court has to or even considers that maximum. They start at the presumptive.
And I think people were confused with that because we had the prosecutors asking for the max. We had family members asking for the max, multiple victims' families, I should say. And we heard a lot about mitigating factors, right? His age, William Owen Hines is 19 years old. And they brought up alcoholism in court that started a few years prior to all of this. So when a judge is looking at all of these things, I think people were hearing 21 max and they thought that was only for Preston's case. But when you look at this plea agreement, all of those things, the judge is taking all of that into account. Is that right?
That is correct. So the judge was considering every single circumstance, all of the mitigating factors for all 4 of those cases. Age being, I think, probably the biggest determination. I think that the defense team, from what I could tell, did a great job of bringing up just how severe the alcoholism was here. I don't think this was a situation where it was just, oh, this is a kid who enjoyed a few drinks. This was a kid with some serious problems. Now, that doesn't excuse his behavior, and I think he was forthright about that. But the court made that determination and said, this is not just a normal drinking problem. This was severe alcoholism, and I would consider that a mitigating factor, which is why we saw a plea that was greater than the presumptive, but a little less than the maximum.
And when it came to, the sentencing portion for Preston's case, that was 12 years, correct, Ashley? And I guess the next question I would ask on that is for you, Armando, as far as, is that if others take plea deals, could we expect to see around that same amount of sentencing?
I think that this is going to really set sort of the bar at where it starts, because I know in my experience in those cases where another defendant has pled out first, I say, Your Honor, this is what this person got. And that person might be more culpable than my client, so therefore my client should get less, or my client is equally as culpable, therefore they should get the same range. The state may argue that my client has more culpability, so they're asking for more, but it does sort of anchor where at least one judge found it was appropriate. So I do think that is going to be realistic moving forward with some of the other individuals. Now, obviously, each individual has their own respective mitigating factors. So whether it gets less than that, I can't say. Whether the plea agreements are the same, I can't say. But I do think that this anchors where we may see the other defendants end up.
And I'm seeing a lot of viewer questions here. A lot of people, the community has been following this case so closely. Now, with William Owen Hines, he pled to a lesser charge. So he was charged felony murder. kidnapping. He pled to a lesser charge of manslaughter. When you look at the manslaughter charge, the maximum that he could have gotten was 21 years. So that was the very most he could have gotten. He couldn't have gotten anything above that. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, that would have been the absolute maximum that the judge could have given him.
And in terms of these, go ahead, Nicole.
Well, I was going to say, I think, one question that the community has been asking, with William Owen Hines taking a plea agreement, does that mean he's going to work with prosecutors to potentially help in these other cases?
Not necessarily, no. And the agreement that I've reviewed and the paperwork I've reviewed doesn't suggest that he will be. There are some times that the prosecutors want a testimonial plea agreement where part of it is you agree to be a witness for the state moving forward. That does not seem to be that was negotiated here. It doesn't seem to be any indication that he will be. So because of that, it seems that his part has ended.
How much of that is done behind closed doors? Because obviously we have 6 other suspects. We could see this process, a similar process, play out again. How much of all of this is talked about behind closed doors between attorneys and prosecutors? And could that be the case here?
Quite a bit of it. In most of my cases, that is what I'm doing. I'm reaching out to the prosecutor, having phone calls, sending them emails, talking really about the legal things, because some of it can be a little bit much for everyone else to take in. So sometimes the lawyers want to go and just talk. There is a settlement conference, I know, in this case. There's been settlement conferences and others, and we have some scheduled. And a lot of times in those settlement conferences, the lawyers will go back and speak to the judges first to talk about the legal issues, some of the other things that may be important. So there is a lot that goes on behind closed doors because it can be sensitive, and sometimes it can be hard for people involved to hear some of the things that the prosecutors and defense attorneys are talking about, because it sounds like we've removed the emotion from it. And that's never the case. Everyone understands that these cases are emotional. Everyone understands that they are tough, but sometimes we have to talk about them only in legal terms. We have to talk about the likelihood that a case will actually prevail at trial on the state side, how likely it is that charges are to be upheld. And that can be difficult. So a lot of that does get done behind closed doors just because we want to sort of take the emotional reaction out of it.
After sentencing 1 week ago for William Owen Hines, we did hear from Preston Lord's parents and family. We also heard from Queen Creek Police Chief Randy Bryce, who was there at the sentencing, his department, the one who investigated Preston's case. We want to play you some of their reaction.
All day in court, a lot of emotions, very hard to deal with, exhausting. I wasn't displeased with the sentencing that took place today. It's hard to call it a win, but we are making progress on this. It's been nonstop, and thankfully we've had the public to be with us on this, and we thank them for everyone that's spoke a kind word or done something to help us out. It's going to be a long road.
The community is invested in seeking justice for Preston just as much as we are, and these court proceedings mean a lot to them to kind of set the precedence for moving forward with the other cases.
I don't think any number brings back somebody that was lost, and I certainly don't think it brings necessarily the comfort that we all want to have. It's just tragedy all the way around.
We have 6 other suspects. Do you plan to be here throughout the course of all of this?
Yeah, so my staff and I will be here as often as possible, especially on these big moments. I think it's important to show the family and the public that the police department is still here, still engaged in what is important. Again, this is a public safety issue that we take very seriously, and we want the public to know that we'll never forget Preston.
So William Owen Hines also got 3 years probation with those 2 aggravated assault cases. Those will run concurrently, so 3 years basically. We did have a question that I have heard a ton from the community on. Kim Hall asking us, though, on Facebook as she watches, will they have to serve 100% of their full sentence? And right now, we just have William Owen Hines, who has been sentenced in this. So really, this question applies to him. 17 years total behind bars. How does that all work?
So the way that he pled to, it was to 2 dangerous offenses, 1 class 2 dangerous, 1 class 3 dangerous. So those are prison mandatory, and in fact, his plea called for prison. Because it's consecutive, he has to serve the first term, that 12 years, basically day for day. So that's going to do 12 full years, right? With any credit that he might get for time served. Now, he doesn't get credit on both cases. From the sentencing order I reviewed, it does appear that he got credit on the vehicular aggravated assault case, which will be 5 years starting from the day that his 12-year term ends, with credit applied. That should be at what's called 85% time. So essentially, he gets credit for 1/7 of every day that he's in custody before being able to come out on community supervision. Because he's going to be released on 3 years of probation, that community supervision is waived. So he'll then come out and start his probation grant once he is finished with the 12 years and then the 5 at 85% time. There are earned release credits that may be available to Owen. I cannot say whether he would be eligible at this point in time or what else might occur while he's in custody to prevent him from claiming eligibility for those. So the 12 years he'll have to serve essentially day for day, and then the 5 years, 85% time with credit for the time that he was in.
Ashley, we did see this week that he has moved from into the prison. So he now has, his paperwork up on the DOC website. We did see that take place this week.
Yeah, and I shared it on my social media, so we know now he is in DOC custody. I also want to mention, every day I get questions from people about the 6 other suspects. They think because maybe we haven't had any kind of an update yet about them, are they still charged? What's going on with their case? Of course, people want to know. And they are still all charged. They're all facing a murder charge at this point. We have 2 suspects that are coming up for settlement conferences at the end of this month, and that is Taylor Sherman and Jacob Meissner. They're going to be in front of 2 totally different judges. So again, Armando, do you think that William Owen Hines' plea agreement is going to come up when they talk in these settlement conferences that are coming up? And do you think that we could see more of these settlement conferences scheduled?
I think we're definitely going to see more settlement conferences. And from my personal experience, I would bring up Mr. Hines's plea agreement when I am talking about my client, as I discussed earlier. I cannot say what each defense team strategy might be, but that's something that I would do. Now, as far as a settlement conference, sometimes you have them and you're able to work out a resolution at that settlement conference. Sometimes you're not, but you've made progress towards a resolution and you'll have a second settlement conference. It just kind of depends. Sometimes you have a settlement conference, you're at an impasse, and you start moving the case towards trial. So settlement conferences are great, and I do expect each individual who has been charged to have one of them, because that's kind of the process here in Maricopa County. We want to try to work out cases if they can be worked out. If they can't be worked out, then that's why we have the constitutional right to a jury trial.
Is there a chance that go ahead.
We could go into those settlement conferences, and at the end of the day, those suspects could come out and they might not take a plea agreement.
That is correct. Again, it is an informal hearing, really a discussion and negotiation between the prosecution, the defense team, and then a judge, not the judge assigned to the case, because we want the defendant to be able to speak freely, to say things that normally would be held against him and normally they wouldn't be able to talk about. It really is a great function that we have in our superior courts here in Arizona to allow the parties to get together and talk to try to work out a resolution. Because oftentimes you're never going to hear from the accused. You're never going to see them admit remorse or talk to the family. And you get that a lot in these cases in a settlement conference, and that can be beneficial, and that can help not just people heal, but help us reach a resolution so that way everyone can move forward.
Is there a chance that everyone will change their plea? And I'm curious if someone decides to go to trial, if one of these suspects, decides to go to trial, how will a guilty plea for like William Owen Hines play into a trial?
So it is possible that they all end up changing their plea. Again, I cannot speak to what each defense team strategy might be or what they feel they have. It is quite possible. Now, obviously, the charges that they're looking at, if they went to trial and were found guilty, they're very serious charges, and that's a lot to risk, right? I mean, they're looking at the possibility of natural life. They're looking at life with release only after 25 years. It's hard for young kids to look at that and say, yes, I'm going to risk that on a trial. But if they do go to trial, as is their constitutional right, then it is unlikely that the fact that Mr. Hines pled guilty is going to come up. It shouldn't come up in any way, shape, or form at all, in fact, because that is separate and apart from whether this individual on trial may be guilty of the charge that they are facing.
So we have 2 settlement conferences at the end of the month scheduled. We have 1 person who's already been sentenced, but that means we have 4 other suspects in this case still. A July trial date is set right now. Obviously, we have some other court dates in June that are going to come up. Do you think that that trial date, because we've heard from their attorneys, the defendant's attorneys, that July trial date is unrealistic. Do you think that we're going to see that pushed back?
I think so. In a case like this, any case involving someone who has died is serious, it's complex, it takes a lot of time. So although the rules require speedy trial, each individual accused of a crime can say, hey, I'm going to waive time. I'm going to go ahead and say we can continue this and push this out. So in order to prepare, in order to make sure that everything has been done to try to reach a resolution, sometimes the parties ask for more time to get that done. I think if we're already hearing that it's unrealistic that July is going to go, more than likely this case will be pushed back. How far back ultimately is up to the case management judge, and the case management judge takes a lot into consideration. How long has this case been going on? How many continuances have been granted prior? How do the next of kin feel about that? That is something that they can weigh. So I don't think July is realistic. I just can't say how far out they might push it.
In terms of all of these suspects, being in this case together, I know that it's come up in court that there might be a motion to sever. Can you explain what that is? And do you think that we'll eventually see something like that?
I think we will eventually get that. And I would think that almost every single accused child may have that, actually, only because we don't want sort of what that question earlier about Mr. Hines's plea to intimated, right? Well, this person pled guilty, isn't everybody else guilty? And so sometimes when you have multiple co-defendants, you run the risk of saying, well, hey, of the jury saying, hey, that person was guilty, we might as well find this third person guilty too. So you will file a motion to sever and say, my client's case should be considered separate and apart from these other people, and here are the reasons why. There's a whole legal analysis that goes into it. There's case law, and ultimately is up to the judge to determine whether each defendant or charge should be severed. Because it's not just a person who can be severed from the case and there are other people. It can be the charges themselves. Now, I don't know that the charges here would be severed given the way that the event played out, but I do think that it is possible we see some of these individuals severed from each other for purposes of trial. Can't guarantee that, obviously, but it is possible.
I want to remind people that we can take your questions if you want to put anything in the comments, if you have other questions that we have not asked. Armando, I did want to ask you, is there anything that you think that people should know as they continue to watch all of this play out and this legal process that can be complex?
That it takes time. I think people don't realize how cumbersome our criminal legal system can be, and that can be frustrating often. Also, when we're talking about cases, we have to keep in mind that the legality of it, the possibility that the state may not prevail is something that the state takes into account if they make a plea offer, if they agree to a resolution. Because at the end of the day, if they can hold somebody accountable for their actions as opposed to possibly having that person found not guilty, the state often will take that route. Now, that may mean a lower sentence that's stipulated to in a plea, and that may seem bizarre from the outside if you are not in the criminal legal system, but that is how plea offers work a lot of the time.
Thank you so much, Armando Nava, for breaking this all down for all of us. I know the community had so many questions, and I think we have hit a ton of those along the way. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to talk to you again as we watch this process play out. So thank you so much for coming on. We're going to talk about Preston's Law here for a few minutes, but I appreciate you joining us and being a part of this conversation.
And Ashley, I know you were down at the legislature this week because we saw a major development with Preston's Law passing out of the legislature. This bill targets the swarming attacks, and if signed into law would mean if someone commits an assault with 2 or more accomplices, the charge would be a class 4 felony. So you were down at the courthouse, down at the legislature this week. I mean, what was the emotion down there?
It was very emotional to watch. Preston's mom, Preston's stepmom, they were there to watch this all happen. We want to show you some of the video because we were the only station there. So we want to show you their reaction before we have a little bit more discussion on this.
Ecstatic. We're a little teary-eyed, but we're just proud.
It strengthens penalties for those who commit violent crimes in groups, not to punish indiscriminately, but to deter calculated, organized brutality. Let us make Preston's name a legacy of reform, not just a reminder of tragedy. With that, I vote aye.
To know that he wasn't able to fight back, and this is our way of being able to give back for him. If he were here, he'd be proud to know that this wouldn't happen to anyone else again.
I hope that this also helps families dealing with those types of senseless violence that does not need to go on in the community.
So you saw the emotion there.
His mom, his mom, because a lot of people have not seen Preston's mom speaking publicly yet.
This time has been, from what has been relayed to me, obviously just so overwhelming and unimaginable and emotional. And I think that you could see her emotion there to just seeing what played out on the House floor and hearing that, she'd feel like Preston would be proud. Now this bill goes to the governor's desk. We're waiting to hear what happens. We could even hear something today. The governor has 5 days to act once she gets that. So we should hear soon what is going to take place. But I started covering Preston's Law back in September. We saw the Maricopa County attorney supporting this. We saw the Queen Creek police chief supporting this, and then obviously the bill's sponsors as well. And I think that the Maricopa County attorney explained that obviously she's prosecuted some of these teen violence cases, and we have seen quite a few people that were probation eligible. And we've seen quite a few people on probation after these teen violence cases that we have covered heavily. So this could change that if it is passed into law. And you saw Melissa Ciconti there, who is Preston's stepmom, Autumn Curiel, who's his mom, and you saw Representative Matt Gress thanking them for what they've done and being a part of it. And now we wait to see what happens with that. But that was just such a major development this week, as something we've been watching as we've continued to cover not only the teen violence cases and also what happens in court, but now what happens at the Capitol. Because I've heard from Preston's parents, they have, justice for Preston Lord, and that has been a huge focus for them. We've actually seen Melissa Ciconti start helping other moms as well, and being a part of the change they've said from the beginning is something that they want to be a part of, and we have seen that, and we saw a big portion of that this week as well. And you've seen, Nicole, we've attended so many events over the last year and a half for Preston, that sea of orange, we say, who shows up for the family. I mean, I think that you were the first to really tell me how impacted the community was and how much they wanted justice, not only for Preston, but for the other victims involved in this. And you saw that firsthand a year and a half ago almost.
Yeah. And I think, it was really people in the community wanting to make sure that Preston's name, Preston's story was heard and that he got justice. Obviously, a heartbreaking, brutal case. And, it was really that movement to get that attention and to make sure that justice, we are now at the point where we are seeing suspects in court now, and they'll have their day in court.
Yeah. I do want to remind people those settlement agreements, or excuse me, those settlement conferences, I should say, coming up at the end of the month. We'll see if those result in plea agreements. And as you just heard from Armando, they don't always. So when we're looking at those dates, we're of course going to have coverage. I was in the courtroom for William Owen Hines settlement conference. And like we said, a lot of that was done behind closed doors. So we actually sat there for a while waiting to see what would happen. We actually took a break, came back, and then in the afternoon, we learned that there was a plea agreement, but we might not see that. Now, someone asked, Kim Hall asking some questions here, and I want to make sure to bring this up because this is something that I get questions about a lot because we have so many people watching and not all the time can people make it to court. So Kim Hall asked, will they be live? So here's the situation with settlement conferences in court. In terms of a camera, like I said, so much of that, it plays out behind closed doors. So when I was in the courtroom, we didn't even see that playing out. So you can expect that any kind of camera request will most likely be turned down. Obviously, we will have to see if there is some kind of a change of plea hearing, if we can get a camera in there. In terms of people live streaming and things like that, we have to request that when we put in our camera request. So we will see obviously what happens and we will have coverage. But in terms of the settlement conference being live or people being able to watch, sometimes we don't even see that playing out in the courtroom. Sometimes you do. I've been to some settlement conferences where they're talking openly, but sometimes you don't. So we're going to have coverage. We're going to continue to follow. We're going to have two really back to back. Again, Taylor Sherman, Jacob Meisner. So we're going to be watching those very closely. And then we have some other court dates coming up in June. And then, of course, the current trial date of July. And you did hear from Armando that he believes that that could be pushed back. And we've heard from a lot of the attorneys for the defendants that they would like it to be pushed back and it's unrealistic is what they say. So we're going to be following that as well. And of course, if that does happen or whatever happens next with the other 6 suspects, we will be following it here on ABC 15 closely. If you guys have other questions, we'd love for you to comment them, send them to us. We, of course, want to make sure that we're helping walk you through this process as it plays out in court. I want to thank Nicole Grigg and, of course, Armando again for joining us. This is a really important conversation. I think last week so many people were confused because there were so many numbers, right? 21 max, then we ended up with 17 total between 2 cases, 12 for Preston, 5 for the vehicular aggravated assault. So we wanted to make sure that we're breaking all of that information down for you. If there's ever anything else you want us to look into, please don't hesitate to reach out. Nicole and I are very open to questions, and we would to take them and make sure that people understand the process that we are watching play out. So thank you for joining us for this Arizona Crime Uncovered special live edition. If you have additional questions, please make sure to let me know. And this will be posted as well to our YouTube, and it's going to be eventually on our app as well. So you guys can watch on our Facebook too. So you can rewatch this, share it, and make sure that people that you know who may have had questions can watch this as well. So thank you guys so much for joining us. We will see you next time.